Hello, dear friend. Welcome to this gentle story told slowly like the soft unfolding of evening itself. You are invited to rest, to release the weight of your day, and to drift into the kind of calm where sleep can find you easily. Tonight's story is called The Seamstress of Dreams. It is about a quiet, thoughtful woman named Mariela who spends her nights sewing in the soft glow of lantern light. She does not hurry. She does not chase time. Instead, she lets the hours drift around her like a warm river carrying her along. So if you are comfortable, you might close your eyes if you wish. Feel your breathing slowing in and out like the measured rhythm of a needle drawing thread. Steady, unbroken, peaceful. We will step gently together into her world. The evening has just begun in Mariela's little studio at the far edge of her village. The day's light has faded into a tender dusk, and outside her wide wooden window the first stars are beginning to appear. The night sky is not hurried either. It too takes its time. Inside, the air is quiet and warm. Mariela has lit her lantern, and its golden light pools across her wooden table, filling the corners of the room with a glow that feels alive. The flame dances gently, never flickering sharply, only swaying as though in its own kind of dream. Around her are shelves stacked neatly with fabric rolls, soft cottons in muted creams, linens in pale sky blues, silks in a faint blush of rose and gentle shades of pearl. The fabrics stand like quiet companions, each waiting for her touch. And tonight, Mariela is happy simply to be here, to move slowly and to let her evening unfold stitch by stitch. She begins by clearing her table in a thoughtful way. There is no rush. Each movement is deliberate, steady, almost ceremonial. She smooths the wooden surface with her palm, feeling the faint ridges of the grain beneath her fingertips. From a nearby shelf, she selects one spool of thread, pale ivory, like moonlight pressed into string. She places it gently upon the table where it gleams in the lantern's glow. Next, she lifts a folded length of fabric. It is cotton soft and light with the delicate fragrance of lavender that lingers faintly in the weave. She presses it to her cheek for just a moment, enjoying its quiet coolness. Then she sets it on the table and smooths it out the fabric, whispering softly as it spreads. The room fills with this hush, an almost musical sound, like the faintest sigh of the night. The steady rhythm of small noises surrounds her like a song. The thread whispers through the needle's eye. The fabric rustles faintly as she shifts it beneath her hands. The lantern flame murmurs its glass clicking softly as it warms. Beyond the walls, crickets hum, patient and steady. Somewhere farther away, an owl calls one long note that drifts into silence. Together, these sounds create a lullaby without words, reminding Mariela that she is held by the night safe and untroubled. With patient fingers, she unwinds a small length of thread from the spool. The strand glimmers faintly in the light, slender and strong. She holds it close, studies it, and with a practiced gesture, guides it through the silver eye of her needle. It slips through without resistance. She knots the end with ease. A gentle pull, the tiniest tightening, and there it is, the first quiet preparation complete. Her work is not about speed or perfection. It is about the rhythm of small steps, each one enough by itself. The joy of doing, not of finishing. Beside her, a clay cup rests on a small coaster of woven straw. Steam rises slowly from the cup, carrying the subtle fragrance of chamomile sweetened with honey. Mariela lifts it to her lips and drinks. The taste is soft and golden. The warmth spreads through her, flowing into her chest and down to her fingertips. She places the cup back carefully, the sound of ceramic touching wood as quiet as a breath. For a moment, she sits still. She feels the steam brush against her face. She feels the cool air pressing gently at the window glass. And she listens again to the thread, the lantern, the night. Her thoughts drift gentle as feathers. She reflects on patience not as waiting, but as dwelling in a moment. Patience, she muses, is like holding a cup of tea in warm hands. It is not about reaching the last sip, but savoring each pause along the way. Every stitch she makes tonight will be part of a greater whole, but none is more important than the one before her now. And so she begins, slowly, carefully. The needle pierces the cotton with a muted sound, sliding through and returning. Thread pulls behind, making a neat little line, simple and true. Stitch, pull, pause, stitch again. Each one feels like a heartbeat, quiet and steady. The window beside her darkens fully. Now the last traces of twilight melting away. The sky becomes a deep velvet, and the first constellations gather above. She does not need to know their names. It is enough to know they are there shining softly. The lantern's glow grows richer, in the contrast filling her studio with golden warmth. Its light falls across the table, across her hands, across the folds of fabric that grow slowly under her care. Outside, the crickets continue their steady chorus. They are joined now by the faint rustle of leaves in the night breeze. The sounds blend together, a natural harmony, patient and enduring. Mariela stitches on her mind, calm and clear her body, moving in its own gentle rhythm. The first length of thread is almost used now. She ties it off neatly, smoothing her work with quiet satisfaction. She folds the fabric, gently lacing it aside on the table. There is no sense of ending, only the contentment of one small step completed. Her cup of tea waits for her, and she sips again, honey lingering on her tongue. Her eyes rest on the lantern's glow, steady and kind. The night stretches before her, and she feels no need to measure it. It will last as long as it lasts, and she will sew as long as she wishes. With the smallest of sighs, Mariela leans back in her chair, her gaze drifting once more to the stars beyond her window. The world outside is vast, but here in her studio, everything is simple, small and safe. The night has deepened, and Mariela feels gently embraced by the stillness that settles like a blanket around her little studio. She has used the first thread and folded her fabric aside, yet the evening is only beginning. A sense of timelessness lingers in the air. The lantern glows steadily, filling the room with its golden light. She notices how the light touches the shelves of fabric, making the colors seem warmer, almost alive in the quiet. The air is fragrant tonight as Mariela sits back and inhales. She notices how the lavender woven into her cotton lingers softly, mingling with the faint scent of beeswax from the candle in her lantern. The smell is gentle, familiar, comforting. She closes her eyes for a moment, simply letting the fragrance hold her, as though it were a quiet lullaby for her senses. Beyond the window, the air that drifts in through the cracks in the wood carries the faintest trace of damp earth, reminding her of the garden outside, dark and resting beneath the stars. She breathes again slowly, and the mixture of lavender, beeswax, and cool night air feels like a blessing she does not need to name. Her hand moves once more toward her tools. She chooses a different fabric now, a piece of silk in the palest shade of rose. It shines faintly in the lantern's glow, catching the light, like water rippling under the moon. She lays it carefully across the table, smoothing her palm over the surface. The texture is so different from the cotton she handled before, where cotton whispered like a meadow breeze. Silk murmurs like still water, cool, fluid, tender against her fingertips. She lets her hand rest on it for a moment longer than needed, simply savoring the feeling of softness beneath her skin. Mariela selects another spool of thread, this one a delicate silver gray, nearly the color of starlight. She unwinds a length and threads her needle with practiced ease. The fabric shifts gently as she adjusts it, the silk sliding beneath her touch with a grace that feels alive. She smiles faintly, reflecting on how each material has its own personality, its own quiet language. Cotton offers strength and steadiness. Silk offers lightness and dream. Each has a place in her work, each deserving of her patience. She sips her tea again, though now it has cooled. The flavor is different, less warmth, more subtle sweetness. Even so, it comforts her. She places the cup back on its straw coaster and leans forward again, returning to the steady rhythm she knows so well. The needle pierces the silk, sliding in and out. The thread follows, leaving behind a faint, silvery path across the pale rose surface. The stitches are so fine they almost disappear into the fabric, as if the cloth were simply born this way. Her movements are unhurried, and as she sews, she thinks quietly about touch. How much of life is known through our fingertips, though we rarely notice. the texture of a wooden chair polished by years of sitting, the coolness of a glass of water on a hot day, the soft fur of a cat brushing against an ankle, the weight of a hand resting gently on another's. Each one is a message, a reminder that we are here alive, part of the world's fabric. Touch, she reflects, is its own kind of language, one that asks for no words. The night answers with its own sensations. The wooden floor beneath her feet is cool, grounding her. The faint breeze sneaks in through the window crack, brushing softly against her skin. The silk continues to glide beneath her hands, smooth as moonlight. Every sense seems to agree that this is enough, that she does not need more than this quiet, tender act of creation. Outside, the village is silent. Perhaps a few windows are still lit, but Mariela cannot see them from here. All she knows is the steady hush that fills the night. The crickets have softened their chorus, as though they too are drifting into slumber. The owl has grown quiet. In their place is only the soft rustle of leaves whispering gently in the darkness. The rhythm of the night is slower now, and Mariela's own rhythm follows it. She ties off the end of her thread and sits back, gazing at the fabric. A small pattern has begun to take shape. It is simple, just a row of fine stitches along the edge, but it pleases her. She folds the silk, gently letting it fall into soft curves upon the table. The sheen catches the lantern's glow, and for a moment, it looks like the surface of a calm lake at twilight. She places it aside carefully, as though it was something fragile, and then stretches her hands, easing them after their gentle work. Her eyes drift to the shelves again. She considers her choices. Linen, perhaps, for its crisp steadiness, or velvet rich and heavy, though it is less forgiving to the needle. She decides on linen, pale blue light and fresh, like a piece of sky caught and woven into cloth. She lifts it and lets it unfold. The fabric releases a faint scent of clean air and sunlight, as though it still remembers the fields where the flax once grew. She smooths it on the table, and the sound is sharper than silk, but still soft like paper, turning under a gentle hand. She chooses thread in a soft gold hue. The contrast will be quiet, but beautiful. She threads her needle again, steady and sure, and begins once more. Stitch by stitch, the line appears tiny glimmers of gold against the pale blue. She feels how the linen resists slightly more than silk, offering her fingers a firmer surface. It grounds her in a different way. The act of sewing linen feels like walking on a quiet forest path, steady shore with the earth firm beneath her feet. Her mind drifts into gentle reflection. She thinks about how each material carries a story. Fields of cotton under the sun's silkworms, spinning their cocoons flax, growing tall before it becomes linen. All of them begin in nature, humble and simple, yet here under her hands, they become something else transformed, renewed, given shape through patience. She wonders if perhaps people are the same beginnings rooted in simple places, lives reshaped by time experience and gentle care. The lantern flickers softly, its flame leaning slightly, as if to nod in agreement. Mariela feels no need to put this into words. She simply continues, stitch by stitch, enjoying the feel of thread sliding through fabric, the faint pull at her fingertips, the small sound it makes each time. The process is the meaning. The rhythm is the answer. When she pauses again, she takes another sip of tea. The last of its warmth is gone now, but the honey remains clinging sweetly to her tongue. She sets the cup down and rests her chin in her hand for a moment, gazing at the linen. Her eyelids grow heavier. The night outside has thickened. The stars seem brighter now, scattered more densely across the sky. She lets her eyes linger on them through the window, each one a quiet light, distant yet steady, like the tiny stitches forming beneath her hands. The thought makes her smile faintly. Perhaps the stars themselves are stitches scattered across the great fabric of the night. Perhaps the sky is a tapestry sewn by patient hands, older than time itself. She imagines such a seamstress sitting in her own quiet studio, guiding threads of light across an endless canvas. The image is soothing, and she lets it linger, not as an answer to any question, but as a dream in itself. She ties off the thread once more and folds the linen, neatly laying it beside the silk and cotton. 3 fabrics now each touched by her patience. She leans back in her chair, letting her hands rest upon her lap. The lantern's glow is steady, the air calm, the scents of lavender, beeswax, and linen weaving together around her. The night feels whole, complete, as though it has all the time in the world. Mariela breathes in deeply, then exhales slowly. She feels her body soften. The stitching has slowed her heartbeat, calmed her thoughts, carried her into this quiet state where everything feels simple. She is not counting the hours. She is not measuring progress. She is only living this moment, one gentle breath at a time. The night stretches endlessly before her, and she feels no need to ask for more. The hours drift on without hurry, as though the night itself has stretched just to keep her company. Mariela feels herself more deeply nestled into the rhythm of her work, the stillness of the studio holding her as gently as the fabrics folded upon her table. Her lantern burns steadily, its flames soft and unwavering, casting a mellow circle of gold that makes the shadows in the corners of the room seem rich rather than dark. The glow is like a living thing, a companion whose warmth reminds her that she is never alone in her quiet rituals. She lifts her gaze from the fabrics for a while and looks toward the wide window. Beyond the glass, the night sky has opened fully, a vast sweep of deep indigo scattered with stars. Some gleam brightly like points of silver pinned into the heavens. Others are faint, just tiny sparkles that flicker and fade. Together, they look like a cloth embroidered with light, as though the universe itself has been stitched by a hand older than memory. She lets her eyes soften, not trying to name the constellations, only allowing the glow to rest upon her, to settle her mind into its own stillness. Her eyes return to the lantern's light, which gilds the edges of her tools and threads. The small silver scissors catch the glow, their blades shimmering faintly. The spools of thread stand like small towers, their colors warmed by the golden wash ivory threads gleam like moonlight, while the silvery gray deepens into the shade of pewter. The fabric she has folded on the side, cotton, silk, linen, all reflect light differently, and Mariela notices with quiet appreciation how each surface seems to tell its own story. The cotton rests matte and steady. The silk shimmers with every shift of the flame, and the linen glows softly, its weave scattering light in tiny flecks. She chooses now a piece of velvet, dark and rich, the color of midnight, with just a hint of blue. As she lifts it, the fabric almost drinks the light, absorbing it rather than reflecting it. Yet when she smooths her palm across the surface, the fibers shift and the glow moves with them, revealing a deep sheen like water stirred in a pool. She lays it across her table, and for a moment it seems as though a piece of the night sky itself has settled in her studio. Mariela pauses, her eyes drinking in the sight. Velvet feels different beneath her hands, heavier, denser, yet more forgiving in its weight. She lets her fingers trace slow patterns across it, watching how the light changes with every movement. There is a small sense of wonder in this simple act, as though she were guiding light itself. Selecting a spool of thread in a shade of muted gold, she threads her needle again. Against the dark velvet, the stitches gleam like tiny stars appearing one by one. Each pull of the needle brings a spark of brightness, a new constellation forming under her touch. She continues, steadily letting the lantern and the velvet conspire together to create their own quiet sky. The light around her shifts almost imperceptibly. Though the lantern remains steady, the shadows it casts move gently as her hands rise and fall, as her shoulders lean forward and back. The play of light and shadow reminds her of how fleeting brightness can be, how it always moves, always changes, yet never truly disappears. The sun sinks, the stars rise, the lantern glows, the candle wanes, and still light is always with us, in one form or another. She reflects on this quietly, the thought wrapping around her as softly as the glow itself. Her eyes wander again to the window. Outside, the stars seem to lean closer, as though they too are curious about her stitching. The moon has risen now, pale and round, casting its silvery wash across the landscape beyond. She cannot see much of the village from her seat, only a few rooftops in the distance, dim outlines resting beneath the moonlight. The trees stand in their silent watch, their branches outlined faintly in silver. The whole world seems hushed, as though it were taking part in the same quiet ritual she is. She continues stitching, and in the corner of her vision, the lantern's light flickers. It is not a warning, only a small sway of the flame as the air shifts. The flicker makes the velvet shimmer even more, its dark surface rippling with gold as if it were breathing. Mariela feels her own breathing match the rhythm, slow and deep, rising and falling like the flame. She sets down her work for a moment to rest her eyes, letting them wander around the studio. She notices the patterns of shadow upon the shelves, the shapes cast by the spools of thread stacked side by side. She notices the way the glass of the lantern glows, softened by the mist of warmth inside. She notices the faint glimmer upon the scissors, the muted gleam of a thimble resting nearby. Even the simplest objects carry beauty when seen in such gentle light. Mariela has always loved the hours when light grows quiet, when it becomes more of a presence than a brightness. In the day, light demands attention. It illuminates, reveals, insists. But at night, lantern light and moonlight have no urgency. They are content simply to be, to offer warmth, to allow shadows to coexist. There is a lesson in that. She thinks to shine without forcing, to illuminate gently, to rest in one's own glow. She picks up the velvet again and continues the thread, slipping through the stitches, growing. The gold against the dark cloth pleases her. It feels almost ceremonial, as if she were honoring the night with each tiny mark. Her eyes soften as she works, watching how the gleam of the thread changes as she shifts her angle, sometimes bright as dawn, sometimes muted as dusk. As the hours slide further along, she begins to feel the heaviness of her eyelids, not from weariness, but from the soothing repetition of her task, the way the light lulls her mind. She ties off her final stitch upon the velvet and smooths it once more, admiring the way the golden thread glows faintly, like scattered sparks. She folds the cloth with care, placing it upon the growing stack beside her. The sight of the neat pile, each fabric touched by her hand tonight, fills her with a calm satisfaction. It is not pride nor achievement, but simply the quiet joy of having walked gently through time. She sips the last of her tea. It is nearly gone now, only a faint sweetness lingering. She sets the cup down and lets her eyes travel once more to the window. The stars shine, the moon glows, and her lantern continues its patient work of holding the darkness at bay. She breathes in the sight, lets it fill her chest, and exhales slowly. The light has been her companion tonight, reminding her that even in shadow, there is always a glow to be found. She thinks about how life is much the same, that moments may seem dim or quiet, but there is always a lantern somewhere, always a star above, always a glow within. The thought rests in her gently, not as a conclusion, but as a quiet reflection she will carry into her sleep. She leans back again, letting her shoulders relax, letting her eyes soften. The lantern hums softly in its flame. The velvet rests folded, the stack of fabric grows, and outside, the stars continue their endless shimmer. Mariela feels wrapped not only in the warmth of her studio, but also in the tender glow of night itself, as though she were part of a larger pattern stitched into the tapestry of time. With that thought, she closes her eyes just for a breath, then opens them again to the soft light of her lantern. The room waits quietly. The night has not rushed, and neither has she. Everything is exactly as it should be. Slow, gentle, safe. The night moves onward, though Mariela hardly notices the passage of time. Within her little studio hours, feels soft like waves that rise and fall without urgency. She has folded the velvet, the linen, the silk, the cotton, each piece resting in its turn upon the table. A gentle stack of dreams, shaped not by haste, but by patience. The lantern glows on faithful in its warmth, while the moon outside climbs higher still, scattering its pale light across the rooftops of the distant village. Mariela sits quietly for a moment, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes softened as they gaze upon the room. A faint weariness has begun to drift into her body, not unwelcome, but the kind of heaviness that comes with being wrapped in calm. She reaches once more for her clay cup, the little vessel that has kept her company all evening. The tea inside has grown cool, yet when she lifts it to her lips, there is still sweetness waiting. The honey lingers faint but golden, spreading across her tongue like sunlight remembered in the middle of the night. She places the cup back upon its straw coaster, the quiet sound almost lost among the stillness. For a moment, she wonders whether to brew another fresh and warm. The thought itself brings comfort, and she decides that, yes, the act of making tea will be as soothing as the drinking. Rising slowly from her chair, she carries the cup across the room to a small wooden cabinet near the wall. On its top sits a simple kettle already filled with water. She touches the side and feels the cool metal. With steady hands, she places it upon a little stove, lights a small flame beneath, and waits. The water warms quietly, the faintest hum, beginning to rise a gentle song that joins the lantern's murmur. Mariela opens a small jar and inhales the fragrance of chamomile blossoms, dried, but still carrying the scent of summer fields. She remembers for a moment the meadow where she gathered them months ago, the tall grasses bending in the wind, the bees moving lazily among the flowers. The memory is not sharp, but soft, like a watercolor painting washed in pale colors. She scoops a small spoonful into a clay pot, adds a drop of honey from a jar that catches the lantern light, and waits as the kettle begins to sigh. The sound of water reaching its boil is slow and steady. When the steam curls upward, she pours carefully, watching the blossoms swirl and settle. The fragrance rises at once, gentle, golden calming. She closes her eyes and breathes it in, feeling it reach deep into her chest, like warmth unfolding from within. She sets the lid upon the pot and waits. This too is part of the ritual, the patience of steeping the trust that flavors will bloom if given time. When she pours at last, the liquid is pale amber, a color that glows in the lantern's light like captured sunlight. She lifts the cup to her lips, and this time the taste is fuller, rounder honey weaving into blossom, the warmth flowing down her throat and spreading through her body like a soft embrace. It is such a simple act, tea, water, honey, yet in the stillness of the night, it feels profound. Mariela thinks quietly about how taste can carry memory, how a single sip can return her to a summer field or to her grandmother's kitchen where she first learned the ritual of steeping leaves. She recalls sitting at a small wooden table as a child, her grandmother's gentle hands moving slowly, never hurried, always precise. She had thought then that patience was a skill only grown-ups possessed. Now, years later, she realizes that patience was not taught with words, but with the small ceremonies of daily life. Tea brewed, bread, kneaded fabric folded. The lessons of flavor and touch were woven into those moments, never announced, always lived. She sips again, closing her eyes. The warmth lingers, sweet and floral. She reflects on how each sense carries its own doorway into stillness. And tonight, taste has opened a path she gladly follows. In the act of drinking tea, she finds a lesson to savor. What is simple, to let the ordinary become extraordinary through attention. Returning to her chair, she places the cup beside her work and looks at the stack of fabrics once more. She decides to continue, but now with lighter spirit, as though each stitch might carry the sweetness of her tea within it. She chooses a new fabric, soft muslin, pale and almost translucent. It reminds her of the early morning sky when dawn first spreads across the horizon. She lays it upon the table and smooths it gently, the cloth light beneath her hands. This time she selects a thread of soft lavender, delicate and calming. As she begins to sew, she feels her body sink deeper into ease, each stitch flowing as naturally as breath. The muslin accepts the thread easily, and the lavender line emerges like a gentle path across a pale meadow. She continues, stitch by stitch, pausing now and then for a sip of tea, each flavor blending with the rhythm of her work. The taste of honey still lingers even after the cup is set down. It brings with it a quiet reflection. Honey, she thinks, is the work of countless bees, each carrying small drops of nectar, each adding their part to a whole. No single bee creates the sweetness, but together their patient work becomes something golden. She wonders if her stitching is the same, that each tiny motion by itself, so small, becomes part of something greater. A whole tapestry of patience created not in a single act, but in thousands of small, steady gestures. Her eyes soften again as she reflects on this truth. She has never hurried her craft, never demanded that it finish quickly. Instead, she has trusted the slow gathering of effort, the way each evening adds to the one before. Perhaps life itself is like honey, she muses, made sweet by countless small acts. Each drop of patience, each touch of care, adding to the whole. The lantern continues to glow, casting its light upon her muslin, upon her lavender thread. The steam from her fresh tea curls upward, carrying fragrance into the air. Outside, the moon shines brighter, its reflection faint upon the glass of her window. The village is quiet, still resting beneath the silver wash. Mariela feels herself resting too, even as her hands move. The act of sewing is no longer work, but a meditation, each stitch a prayer, each sip of tea a benediction. When at last she ties off the lavender thread, she folds the muslin carefully and adds it to the stack. The pile has grown steadily, a small mountain of fabrics touched by patience and love. She looks at it with quiet affection, not as a measure of productivity, but as a reminder of presence. Each piece is a memory of the night's unfolding, a companion to her reflections. She drinks the last of her tea, now warm, rather than hot, and sets the cup aside. The taste of honey remains soft and golden, resting on her tongue like the faint glow of morning light. She exhales slowly, leaning back into her chair, letting her body relax once more. The lantern flickers gently. The moon watches from above, and the night continues its patient passage. In her heart, she carries the sweetness of tea, the memory of meadows, the lesson of bees, and the thought that every small act, every stitch, every sip matters in the quiet tapestry of life. She closes her eyes briefly, holding on to that reflection, and when she opens them again, the room is exactly as she left it, safe, calm, glowing, and filled with peace. The stack of fabrics has grown taller now, each piece folded neatly, each carrying within it the story of the night. Cotton, silk, linen, velvet, muslin, all resting together in a quiet harmony of textures. Mariela sits before them, her lantern glowing steadily. Her tea finished her mind, drifting in the soft current of her work. She feels a stillness that is not empty, but full of warmth, full of the weightless satisfaction that comes when one has moved slowly, attentively, without force. Her eyes fall to a piece of wool resting on the shelf, a fabric she has not yet touched tonight. It is thick, woven in muted gray, with threads that curl faintly at the edges. She lifts it into her lap, and at once she notices how heavy it feels compared to the others. The wool carries the sensation of autumn nights of blankets pulled around shoulders of warmth kept close to the body. She lets it drape across her arms, savoring the weight. It grounds her, pulling her gently deeper into the embrace of the evening. She smooths her palm across the surface, feeling the faint roughness, the way the fibers spring back against her skin. There is comfort in this texture, a reminder that softness can come from strength. Where silk whispered and muslin floated, wool speaks with firmness, reassuring in its durability. Mariela lays it across her table, folding it once more so the lantern's light can play upon it. The gray surface drinks in the glow, softened like a storm cloud in the middle of a golden sunset. She chooses a thread in deep blue, nearly the shade of midnight itself. When she threads her needle and begins to stitch, the wool pushes back against her touch, offering resistance. Yet she welcomes it, guiding the needle with patience, steadying each pull. The thread emerges dark against the gray, like a river winding through stone. The rhythm is slower here, heavier, each stitch requiring more strength, more presence. She follows it willingly, adjusting her breath to match. Her thoughts drift as she works. She reflects on weight, the weight of fabric, the weight of time, the weight of life itself. So often people speak of weight as something to bear a burden. Yet here, with wool in her lap, she feels how weight can also comfort, how it can steady, how it can remind us we are held. A heavy blanket on a winter night is not a burden, but a blessing. The wool in her hands is not resistance, but reassurance. She stitches slowly, and the wool gathers beneath her fingers. When she pauses, she places her palm upon it and simply rests there. The warmth from her hand lingers, spreading into the fabric. She imagines how one day this piece might keep someone warm, wrapped close around their shoulders, shielding them from cold. It pleases her to think that patience given now will become comfort later, that the quiet work of tonight will echo gently into another's life. The lantern flickers slightly, and she adjusts it with calm hands, trimming the wick so the flame burns steady again. Its light brushes over her wool, her table, her face filling the room with the same golden hush that has carried her through the evening. She notices the shadows growing deeper, the air heavier with night. Even the crickets outside have grown quieter, their chorus softened as though they too are drowsing. Mariela feels the same heaviness in her body, not unpleasant, but like the wool itself, weighty in a comforting way. Her eyelids lower more often now, her breath lengthens, her shoulders drop. Still, she continues, stitch by slow stitch, savoring each movement as though it were the last light of the day. The blue thread winds across the wool patient, strong, steady. When she finishes her line, she ties it neatly and sets the wool aside. She smooths her palm across it one more time, then folds it with care, adding it to the growing stack. The pile now seems like a little tower of textures, light and heavy, smooth and rough, shimmering and matte. Together, they create a silent symphony, each fabric adding its voice to the night's lullaby. She leans back in her chair and lets her eyes close, if only for a moment. She imagines herself lying beneath all those fabrics at once, wrapped in cotton, silk, linen, velvet, muslin, and wool. She imagines the weight of them pressing gently over her body, not too much, only enough to make her feel cocooned safe, surrounded by the patience of her own hands. The thought carries her further towards sleep, though she still holds herself in the delicate balance between wakefulness and dream. Opening her eyes again, she looks to her window. The moon is high, pouring silver light across the glass, while stars continue to shimmer beyond. She watches them for a while, noticing how their glow seems to shift with her own blinking, how some appear brighter when she softens her gaze. It reminds her of the thread gleaming against velvet earlier in the night, and she thinks again of the sky as a fabric stitched with light, stretching endlessly. Her hands rest quietly now, yet she feels no need to force herself onward. The night has carried her far already, and she trusts its rhythm. Still, she chooses one last fabric from her shelves, something soft and familiar, flannel patterned with muted stripes of cream and faded blue. She spreads it out across her lap and strokes it gently. The fabric is warm, brushed to a softness that feels almost like fur. She cannot help but smile as her fingers trail across it, for it reminds her of childhood, of the flannel blankets her mother once tucked around her before sleep. She selects a thread of simple cream close to the color of the fabric itself. The stitches she makes now are nearly invisible, as though they were always part of the cloth. The act feels like mending, though there is nothing broken. It feels like affirmation that sometimes the work is not to add, not to transform, but simply to hold things as they are, to strengthen what already exists. As she sews, she reflects on how much of life is like this quiet maintenance, unseen but essential. We patch, we mend, we reinforce. We add strength not with grand gestures, but with small, nearly invisible stitches. She smiles faintly at the thought content, to think that in some way her work echoes the unseen stitches of time itself. Her movements slow the stitches, fewer her breath longer. She ties off the last thread, folds the flannel, and places it upon the stack. The pile now stands tall, a tower of patience, each piece a chapter of the night. She gazes at it for a long moment, letting the sight fill her with contentment. It is not the fabrics themselves she knows, but the rhythm of their making, the stillness of their presence, the way they have guided her deeper into calm. She rests her hands upon her lap, closes her eyes once more, and breathes deeply. The night feels thick around her now, like velvet draped across the world. The air is cooler, the silence deeper, the glow of her lantern softer. She feels the weight of the day gone, the weight of the night settling in the weight of her own body, resting gently into the chair. It is a weight she welcomes, a weight that tells her she is safe enough to let go. For a long moment, she does not move. The studio holds her, the lantern guards her, the night surrounds her. She imagines again the fabrics piled over her, each layer a blanket of patience, each one carrying the memory of her touch. She imagines drifting into sleep beneath them. And already she feels herself sinking closer to that state. Her head tilts slightly. Her breath slows further. The stitches of the evening are complete. The seamstress of dreams is herself being sewn into slumber. The lantern glows steadily, though its flame has lowered, slightly softened by the hours that have passed. Mariela notices the way the light feels gentler now, less insistent, more like a whisper than a presence. It suits the hour, for the night itself has deepened, carrying her further into stillness. She gazes at her stack of fabrics: cotton, silk, linen, velvet, muslin, wool, flannel, each folded neatly, each touched by her patient hands. The sight is not only of cloth, but of time, made visible hours stitched into form. She lifts her cup, but finds it empty. The last sip of tea has long since gone, and even the faint fragrance has faded. Yet she feels no need to brew more. The warmth of the night itself has entered her, and the memory of honey and blossoms lingers softly upon her tongue. She sets the cup aside, content that the ritual has done its work. Her body feels heavier now. She notices the way her shoulders relax more fully against the back of her chair, the way her hands settle easily in her lap, the way her breath lengthens without effort. She does not fight the heaviness. She welcomes it, as she welcomed the weight of wool earlier, as she welcomed the quiet hush of night. To feel heavy is to feel held, she thinks. To feel drowsy is to feel invited toward rest. She looks toward the window once more. The moon is higher still, glowing silver against the deep indigo sky. The stars appear steadier now, less like sparks, more like steady companions that will remain long after her eyes close. Beyond the window, the village is silent roofs, dark and still. Even the crickets have softened to the faintest murmur, like distant breathing. The world seems to have slowed entirely, pausing with her, offering her this long, unbroken stretch of quiet. Mariela decides to tidy her table, though the act is not about order, but about closure. She gathers the loose spools of thread, winding them carefully before placing them back upon the shelf. She aligns her scissors, her thimble, her needles, arranging them so they rest in harmony with one another. The motions are unhurried, each one deliberate as though each tool deserves a farewell for the night. The sound of metal upon wood, the faint click of a spool settling in its place, the whisper of fabric folding all blend together in the hush of the studio. She smooths the stack of completed fabrics with both hands, pressing gently so they sit neatly. The pile is modest, yet to her it feels abundant, for it holds not only cloth, but the essence of the evening. Each layer is a reminder of patience, of calm, of presence. She rests her palms upon them for a moment, as though blessing the work, and then lets her hands fall back into her lap. Her gaze drifts upward to the shelves that still hold many fabrics untouched. She knows there will be other nights, other hours, other lanterns lit. Tonight has been enough. The thought soothes her, reminding her that life is not about finishing, but about returning again and again to the rituals that calm us, to the small acts that bring us peace. The lantern flickers faintly, its flame bowing and rising. She watches it with softened eyes, her mind drifting into reflections about time. Hours, she thinks, are not to be counted like coins, but savored like threads. One does not need to hold them tightly. One only needs to let them pass through gently, stitch by stitch, until the fabric of a day is complete. Tonight has been such a fabric woven from sound, scent, light, taste, touch, and now this quiet weight of time itself. She leans back further in her chair, letting her body settle. The wood is firm, but it feels steady, grounding her. She tilts her head slightly, her eyes lingering upon the lantern. Its light seems softer still, as though it too is preparing for sleep. She considers extinguishing it, yet for now, she enjoys its company. The glow makes her feel cocooned, embraced by warmth against the darkness beyond. Her eyelids grow heavier, and she allows them to close for a while. In the darkness behind her eyes, she sees faint images, the glimmer of silk, the shimmer of velvet, the pale muslin like morning sky, the wool like autumn evenings. She sees stitches forming constellations, golden thread, winding like rivers, lavender lines, crossing pale cloth. These images drift and shift, blending with the memory of stars outside, until she can no longer tell where fabric ends and sky begins. She rests there, hovering between thought and dream, neither asleep nor fully awake. When she opens her eyes again, the room looks softer, blurred by the weight of drowsiness. She notices details she had not before. The faint halo around the lantern's glow, the shadow of her stack of fabrics stretching long across the table, the subtle shimmer of steam still clinging faintly to the rim of her empty cup. These small sights feel precious, as though they were gifts of the night, offered only to those who linger until this late hour. Mariela rises slowly from her chair. She moves to the shelves once more, not to work, but simply to let her hands trail across the fabrics still waiting. Linen, velvet, cotton, silk. Her fingertips brush each one, acknowledging them, promising to return another time. The textures respond beneath her touch, some cool, some warm, some smooth, some firm. She feels as though she is saying good night to each of them, as one might to dear friends before sleep. She returns to the table and places her hand upon the stack once more. The fabrics are warm where her lantern's glow has touched them, soft and yielding under her palm. She presses gently as though to anchor herself in their presence, and then she withdraws satisfied. Her gaze drifts to the window again. The moon is now high above, casting its silver wash over the rooftops, the fields, the quiet trees. She imagines the village beneath every home, dark and resting, every soul carried in their own dreams. She feels herself part of that greater stillness, once seam in a vast fabric stitched together with countless others. The thought comforts her, reminding her that she too belongs to the night's gentle tapestry. She extinguishes the flame beneath her kettle, which has long since cooled. She straightens the small mat beneath her chair. She draws her shawl tighter around her shoulders, savoring the warmth of its familiar weight. These are small actions, but in their simplicity, they feel sacred, closing the night's ritual with quiet grace. Her body feels heavier now, but in a tender way, like being wrapped in a quilt. She walks slowly to the door of her studio, placing her hand on the wooden frame. The lantern still glows behind her. The fabrics rest upon the table. The night waits beyond the window. She breathes deeply, feeling the air enter her lungs cool and clean, carrying with it the scent of lavender, honey wool, and time itself. She turns back once more to gaze at the room. The sight fills her with calm. She knows she will return tomorrow and the day after, and as long as she wishes. For now, the work has done what it needed. It has guided her into peace, into rest, into the edge of sleep. She lowers the lantern's flame, watching as it softens, then bows, then fades into a quiet ember. Darkness fills the room, but it is not an emptiness. It is a fullness, a quiet presence that enfolds her gently. Mariela steps away from the table and toward her resting place. The fabrics remain, the night continues, and her body surrenders further to the heaviness that has been building all along. She feels the passage of time as a lullaby, each hour a verse, each stitch a note, each breath a line of melody. And now the song carries her toward its quietest refrain. She is ready to close her eyes, ready to sink into the dream she has been sowing all along. The studio is quiet now, darker than it has been all evening, though not without comfort. The lantern has been dimmed to its faintest ember, no more than a glow at the center of the room, like a heartbeat slowly resting. The fabrics lie folded upon the table patient, and still, their colors hidden in the hush of night. The air is cool, carrying with it the faint fragrance of wool and linen of threads that still remember her touch of tea that has left behind only the memory of sweetness. Mariela moves slowly across the room. Each step measured her bare feet, brushing softly against the wooden floor. She feels the cool surface, the faint grain beneath her skin, grounding her in this simple act of walking. The night surrounds her, but it is not empty. It is full of silence, full of stillness, full of the gentle passage that carries her from the waking world to the realm of dreams. She passes her hand along the wall as she goes, fingertips grazing the wood, feeling its familiar texture. The wood has held her studio for many years, and beneath her hand, she senses its patience, the way it has stood through seasons of sunlight and storm, always steady, always sheltering. Tonight it feels as though the walls themselves breathe with her, exhaling calm, inhaling quiet. Her resting place waits in a corner of the studio not far from her table of fabrics. It is simple, a low bed draped in soft linen sheets, with a quilt folded neatly at the end. The quilt is one she made herself long ago. It squares a patchwork of old fabrics, each carrying a memory. Cotton from a dress once worn in summer wool, from a scarf gifted in winter linen that once hung as a curtain in her window, all stitched together, all joined by her own hand, transformed into something that has kept her warm through many nights. She lowers herself onto the bed, the sheets cool at first against her skin, then warming quickly with her body's presence. She pulls the quilt over herself, savoring its weight, the way it presses gently down, as if to reassure her that she is safe, held, cared for. She breathes deeply, feeling her chest rise and fall beneath its embrace, feeling the day settle fully behind her. Her eyes drift to the window one last time. From her bed, she can still see the sky, the moon high and silver, the stars scattered like threads of light across a dark fabric. She lets her gaze soften, no longer focusing, only letting the shapes and glimmers blur until they become a soft wash of brightness, like a painting dissolving at the edges. She blinks slowly, her lashes heavy, her vision hazy. The sight feels dreamlike already, as though she were watching the night not with her waking eyes, but with the eyes of sleep. The quilt warms her further, and she shifts slightly, tucking herself deeper into the folds. She feels the layers of fabric against her linen sheets. Smooth, quilt squares, textured and varied, each patch carrying its own quiet story. The sensation is grounding, yet also floating, as though she were anchored to comfort, and at the same time drifting into something beyond. She closes her eyes for a breath, and behind her eyelids, she sees flashes of color, ivory, rose, blue, gray threads and fabrics continuing their dance even in darkness. Her breath slows, long and even. She listens to its sound, soft and steady, mingling with the faint hush of the night outside. The crickets are nearly gone now, their chorus reduced to an occasional note like a whisper, reminding her of the world beyond. The breeze sighs against the window, gentle and kind. The silence is no longer empty, but full, a vast ocean upon which she floats. Each breath, a wave carrying her further outward. Mariela reflects faintly on dreams, those quiet companions that arrive when the lanterns are lowered and the quilts are drawn close. She has always thought of dreams as fabrics themselves, woven from memory and imagination stitched together by the patient hands of the night. Tonight, she wonders what fabric her dreams will take. Will they shimmer like silk, soft and luminous? Will they ground her like wool, steady and warm? Or will they be patchworks like her quilt fragments of memory joined into a whole? She will never fully recall upon waking. The thought pleases her, and she smiles faintly in the dark. Her body sinks deeper muscles, loosening bones resting. The quilt grows heavier only because she grows lighter, drifting further from the weight of waking life. She thinks of her grandmother again, of evenings spent watching her stitch by lamplight, of the soft songs she would hum, not for an audience, but for herself. Mariela hums a note now, just one, quiet and low. It fades almost instantly, but its echo remains within her chest, calming her even further. She turns her head slightly against the pillow, feeling its softness cradle her. The pillow smells faintly of lavender, the sachet she tucked inside long ago, still carrying its fragrance. The scent mingles with her memory of tea, with the faint aroma of fabric, creating a bouquet of calm that eases her further towards sleep. Her eyes remain closed now. She no longer feels the need to open them. The images behind her eyelids grow softer, less distinct. She sees not fabrics, but patterns of light, golden threads, weaving through darkness, silver stars stitched into velvet blue rivers, winding across endless fields. They appear and vanish, form and dissolve, until she can no longer tell if she is dreaming already. Her breathing carries her deeper, in and out, a tide without end, without effort. She feels the edges of herself blur her body, dissolving into the quilt dissolving into the bed dissolving into the night itself. There is no separation now, only a single fabric, vast and endless, in which she is a thread, a seamstress who has become part of the very tapestry she has spent her life sewing. She feels warmth rising from within, not from tea or quilt or lantern, but from herself. A quiet glow, steady and calm, as though her own heart were a lantern that does not fade. She realizes that perhaps this is what it means to rest, not to lose oneself, but to return inward to the glow that has always been there. The night hums around her steady and patient. She imagines the stars above continuing their silent work, sewing themselves across the sky, stitch by stitch, hour by hour. She imagines that when morning comes, they will fold themselves neatly away, leaving behind only the pale muslin of dawn. And she knows that when night returns, they will come again like fabrics she has left waiting on a shelf, always ready to be touched, always ready to glow. Her breath lengthens once more. Her body loosens further. Thoughts dissolve. She feels as though she is lying not in a bed but in the embrace of the universe itself, swaddled in fabrics woven from time and space. She lets herself sink, not resisting, not clinging, only trusting. She is safe. She is held. She is already part of the dream she sought to sow. The night has deepened to its quietest hour. The lantern has lowered into a faint glow, no more than a breath of light, and soon even that will rest. Mariela lies beneath her quilt, her body nestled into the soft embrace of fabric, her eyes closed, her breathing long and slow. The room around her has grown hushed, as though every object has settled into its own slumber. The spools of thread, the folded fabrics, the silver scissors, the shelves of cloth, all resting in silence, content with the work of the evening. Her quilt warms her evenly, the patchwork squares pressing gently against her body, their varied textures carrying the memories of seasons past. She feels the weight of it holding her, not heavy, but protective, like the touch of a guardian. Beneath it, her body releases its last reserves of tension, the softness of her shoulders, the looseness of her arms, the heaviness of her legs, all flowing downward into the bed. She exhales, and with that breath, the last fragments of the day drift away. Through the window, the moon lingers at its height steady, and silver casting a faint wash upon the floorboards. The stars continue their eternal shimmer, though Mariela no longer opens her eyes to see them. She carries them within her, now stitched into the quilt of her thoughts, embroidered upon the inner fabric of her imagination. Even with her eyes closed, she feels their presence bright and watchful, steady and calm. Her breathing becomes the only sound, a rhythm that matches the pulse of the night. In and out. The sound is so steady, so sure that it begins to blend with the silence until even it dissolves. Each breath is like a stitch, sewing her more deeply into the tapestry of sleep, one thread at a time until she is fully part of it. Her mind drifts softly. At first, she sees fabrics, still the shimmer of silk, the weight of wool, the translucence of muslin, the glow of velvet. They float before her like clouds overlapping, drifting apart, blending into one another. Then they shift, becoming shapes more dreamlike. The silk stretches into a pale horizon. The wool gathers into a dark forest. The linen folds into an open sky. She feels herself walking through them, though she does not move. They unfold for her, carrying her deeper without effort. The scent of lavender lingers faintly from her pillow, weaving into the air of her dream. It reminds her of fields, stretching endlessly purple blossoms, swaying gently under a summer breeze. She imagines herself walking through such a field, though she feels no weight in her body, only a floating presence. The blossoms brush against her fingertips, soft and fragrant, and the air carries the hum of bees, gentle and steady, a sound that melts quickly into silence again. The sweetness of honey follows, faint and golden, like a memory that returns only to remind her of comfort. It drifts across her tongue as if she has sipped from her cup again, though she knows the cup is empty. The taste itself becomes a dream, a warmth spreading inward, fading outward, leaving her lighter still. Time dissolves. She cannot tell if she has lain here for minutes or for hours, nor does she need to know. The quilt feels eternal, the pillow timeless, the darkness infinite and safe. Each breath carries her further, until the concept of hours fades, leaving only the vast, gentle stretch of rest. Her thoughts dissolve into images. She sees threads of silver unraveling into stars, then stars weaving themselves back into thread. She sees lantern light pooling into rivers of gold that flow across her quilt, then fade into the horizon. She sees herself at her sewing table again, but this time she is not working. She is watching as unseen hands stitch the very air with patterns of light, creating constellations that rise and fall with the rhythm of her breath. The quilt beneath her feels as though it has grown larger, spreading outward until it covers not only her bed, not only her room, but the entire village, the fields, the forests, the hills. She imagines every home beneath it, every person held safely in its folds, each one resting, each one dreaming. She smiles faintly at the thought, a smile that stays even as she drifts. Her body is nearly gone to her now. She feels only a floating presence, as though she herself has become fabric light and soft, woven into the quilt of the night. Her thoughts are threads unraveling gently without resistance, drifting into the weave of sleep. She lets them go one by one until none remain. There is only the softness of the pillow, the warmth of the quilt, the faint fragrance of lavender, the memory of honey, the silence of the night. There is only breath slower now, lighter now, fading gently into the rhythm of dreams. There is only the sense of being held by the quilt, by the night, by the vast, tender fabric of the universe. Mariela has become the seamstress of dreams, but she no longer stitches with her hands. She stitches with her very being, sewing herself into sleep, into safety, into peace. The work of the evening is complete in the fabrics folded on her table, but in the calm that has spread within her, the dream she has already entered. The lantern fades finally, its ember softening into darkness. The room is shadow, but it is a shadow that glows inwardly, lit by the presence of rest. Outside, the stars continue their watch, though Mariela no longer sees them. She is already among them, dreaming beneath their light. And so the night holds her quiet and complete. She breathes once more, then again, each breath deeper in silence, each breath a thread that binds her further into the tapestry of sleep. She drifts now fully, and finally her body surrendered, her mind woven into dreams. The seamstress rests, and the night itself becomes her quilt.